I'll never forget that day. My father's lawyer called and said a sentence that felt like a shock punch in the back. We've updated the estate plan. My family had cut me out. Every share, every parcel, every dollar tied to Randall Timber was reassigned to Tony and Wayne. The lake house, the succession plan, the retirement accounts, gone. Not a mistake, a family execution. I remember the exact sound the phone made when I hung up. No, when I slammed it down so hard the plastic cracked. It was the same hollow ringing I'd heard at the dinner table the night before, when the first knife slid into my back and everyone pretended it was just a fork. I wasn't that shocked they'd betrayed me. I was enraged they were sloppy about it. They'd handed me the evidence on a silver platter. Arrogance, contempt, the quiet belief that I'd beg for crumbs. Well, they were wrong. Very, very wrong. By sunset that day, I had a new plan. I wasn't going to beg. I was going to build. And then I was going to destroy them with it. It started with the dinner because if you want to know where a wound opens, look at the moment the skin parts. The Randall estate dinners were ritualized cruelty in oak and silver. I walked in carrying an 87-page pitch deck, a year of research, and the kind of awkward hope that makes you sound naive at family tables. Stupid of me. I should have known better. Quick! Hide the trees! Leah's got another PowerPoint, my brother Wayne muttered as I set the laptop down. Again. The same condescending sneer I'd been subjected to my whole life. My other brother Tony didn't look up from his whiskey. PowerPoint season, he said, laughing the kind of laugh that tells you your place without saying it. That laugh that said I was nothing but an annoyance to them. My hands were shaking, not from nerves, from pure, concentrated fury, but I pushed it down. I started with numbers, because numbers hurt less. Here's my idea, I said, evergreen escape. We take 10% of our land that's just sitting there doing nothing and turn it into this nature event business. Weddings, corporate retreats, team building camps, stuff like that. The rest stays timber like always. I've run all the numbers, found grants we can get, and the mayor's already asking about it. Look, if we use 10% for ecotourism, we can double our money in 5 years. There are grants and carbon credits that'll help pay for everything. You want to turn Randall Timber into a wedding venue? Tony barked, finally looking at me with that nasty smile he thinks is funny. The rage was building in my chest like lava. It's called diversification, I said, my voice tight because I was trying so hard to stay calm. It's spreading our risk. It's planning for the future. Planning for the future? My father cut me off, spitting the words like they tasted bad. He put his fork down real slow and the whole room went quiet. You come into my house telling me how to run a company I built when you were still in diapers? Something exploded inside me. White-hot nuclear rage. I'm trying to save it. Timber companies are dying. You think a spreadsheet makes you smarter than me? He snarled, and for the first time the silverware jumped as he slammed his fist on the table. The room tensed. My mouth went dry, but not from fear, from pure fury and hatred. I looked at Mom for support, but she just kept quiet and folded her hands like she did when she used to braid my hair. But now, instead of it being a gentle gesture, it looked like a cowardly unwillingness to choose. Yet again, she was the peacekeeper who kept peace by feeding me to the wolves. By dessert, my proposal wasn't the issue. I was the issue. I closed my laptop the same way my father closed arguments, with slow, absolute finality. I stood. No voice-raised theatrics, no begging. The fury was too pure for that. I left the house, slammed the door so hard the glass rattled in the frames, and felt something fundamental shatter inside me. Now they'd given me something they didn't mean to give. Permission. Permission to stop being the daughter who asks. Permission to stop hoping they'd see the value of my work. Permission to stop being polite while they carved me out of the story. Permission to become their worst nightmare. That very night, quite late, the attorney called. The will had been updated. Due to ongoing ideological differences, the documents read, blunt and final. I'd been erased from my inheritance with legal ink. I didn't sleep. I couldn't. I was too angry. So I did 3 things. First, I gathered everything I had. Emails, old board notes, the ledger lines Cameron once warned me about. Next, I secured copies in 3 places they'd never think to look. And finally, I made 2 calls. To Winnie Lark in San Francisco, who owed me favors from Stanford. and Cameron Hayes, who'd watched Randall's books for years before the brothers restructured him out. Between them, they exposed all the holes my family had sloppily left in its armor, gave me a roadmap to exploit them, and showed me the tools I could weaponize to destroy them. It was a masterclass. I slept for 2 hours and woke up feeling quite calm, the kind of calm you get when you've decided you're going to crush everything your enemies love. It was time for war, and I was ready. The first rule of revenge is simple. You don't announce it. You wear it like an underlayer, cold, hidden, and ready to leap on them like a predator when the moment comes. While Tony and Wayne probably thought I was nursing my wounds over bad wine in my apartment, I was building something sharp enough to cut through their empire without drawing blood until it was too late. Winnie, my Stanford contact, specialized in making companies look good for venture capital, which meant she also knew how to make them look appallingly bad. Over coffee in a loud San Francisco cafe, she slid me a USB stick. "These," she said, "are your brother's sins wrapped in quarterly reports. You'll like the Montana invoices. There's enough fake logging work here to plant an entire forest. And burn it down." The rage that shot through me when I saw those documents was pure voltage. Years of their smugness, their certainty that they were untouchable. And here was proof they were nothing but common criminals in expensive suits. Step 2 was finding the pressure points, those quiet, overlooked people who actually kept Randall running, vendors with overdue payments, junior managers passed over for promotions, long-term contractors screwed in small but consistent ways, people who hated my family as much as I did. Cameron Hayes, the family's former chief financial officer, now lived out of state, but flew in specially once I explained what had happened. He was my key to the kingdom. "Your dad never respected the bench," he told me, his voice thick with years of accumulated resentment. "He's got talent in there that he treats like disposable parts. If you make them feel valued, they'll bleed for you." We built a list: foremen, procurement leads, field supervisors, the names of longtime workers that my father never remembered, appreciated, or rewarded, but relied on every single day. For the next 3 months, I played the dutiful daughter from afar while siphoning loyalty from inside Randall Timber like a slow leak in their foundation. Cameron arranged discreet meetings. I built partnerships with my family's competitors. Then, one by one, the people my father undervalued told me what it would take for them to walk. Better pay, modern safety equipment, actual decision-making power. All of them had the same condition. "Don't make me regret this." "You won't," I promised each one, and I meant it with savage conviction. "But they will." The day my first contract came back signed, Logan, head of the Oregon milling operation, I felt something I hadn't since before the will. Power. Pure, intoxicating, lethal power. The first crack came sooner than expected. An environmental group filed a public suit against Randall Timber for failing to meet replanting quotas. It was small, the kind of thing a company usually buries quietly. But this time, I knew it would hit harder, because I'd already made sure the right reporters saw the right leaked documents. The news cycle spun, and my brothers scrambled like rats in a flooding basement. Tony gave a combative interview that only made things worse. Wayne, never good under pressure, snapped at a journalist on camera. Watching them destroy themselves on live television was better than Christmas morning. Vendors started calling me, quietly, cautiously, asking if I was really getting back into the business. They'd heard I took care of my people. Word travels fast in small towns. By month 4, Randall Timber was bleeding contracts faster than they could patch them. The cracks weren't obvious yet, but I could feel the structure shifting. I could smell their fear. The plan was simple now. Keep taking pieces until the company wasn't theirs anymore, without them realizing it, until I was holding the deed. They cut me out of the will. I was about to cut them out of their legacy. There's a particular sound a company makes when it starts to unravel. It's not dramatic, no explosions, no public screaming. It's quiet. The phones start ringing a little less. Emails go unanswered. Meetings get postponed. By early spring, Randall Timber was making that sound. The sound of something dying. The Oregon mill, Logan's mill, reported unexpected equipment failures that halted production for 10 days. The truth? He'd quietly shifted his best workers to my new holding company's side contracts. Production quotas tanked, late deliveries mounted, and buyers started calling competitors. Every missed deadline felt like a knife twist in their backs. In Montana, a major government supply bid went to a rival firm. My rival firm. It wasn't even a secret. My name was right there in the bid paperwork. But Tony and Wayne were too busy fighting over which of them was to blame to notice who had beaten them. Then came the accountants. With Cameron's help, I poached the junior controller who managed their vendor payments. She didn't sabotage the books. Too obvious. She just delayed things. Vendors stopped being paid on time, and Randall Timber's credit rating took its first hit in decades. Meanwhile, I kept my face clean. Publicly, I was just consulting for a few environmental firms. Privately, I was building a shadow version of Randall Timber. Leaner, faster, and loyal to me. One night, Winnie showed me a press release. Exciting expansion into Western territories. The Fury transformed into something even better. Pure. Joy. They were moving into an area I already controlled through my shell companies. The land rights were mine, the suppliers were mine, even the local permit officers owed me favors. They're walking into a minefield, I said. Winnie smirked. You're walking them into one. I let them expand. Pour money into new facilities they couldn't operate without my say-so. Every time I saved them, I took another piece. A small equity share here, a minor asset transfer there. Individually, they looked harmless. Together, they were the slow theft of an empire, death by 1,000 cuts. The first real break in their confidence came after a quarterly board meeting. Tony called me out of the blue, his voice tight with panic. What do you know about the Western Territories contracts? He demanded. I feigned ignorance, savoring every second of his desperation. Why would I know anything about your contracts? We're getting squeezed. It's like someone's cutting us off at every angle. That sounds difficult, I said, letting just enough pity drip into my tone to make it sting. That was the moment I knew the clock had started ticking. Once they suspected me, I had maybe 6 months to finish the job. I accelerated, bought up more equipment, pulled more of their best people into my camp, leaked another set of compliance failures to the press. Anonymous tips, of course, which sent their legal team into full panic mode. And then, the move I'd been saving. I made my offer to their largest private investor, Mr. Fenton. It was clean, strategic, attractive enough that even a man who'd been friends with my father for 40 years couldn't say no. When the deal closed, I held 32% of Randall Timber. I didn't need the will anymore. I was already in the boardroom. They still hadn't put it together. The beautiful, arrogant fools. The first time they accused me outright, it wasn't in some smoky back room or at a polite board meeting. It was in public, at a charity gala. I hadn't planned to go, but Winnie convinced me it was strategically useful. Translation, the brothers would be there, desperate to reassure the community that Randall Timber was weathering a temporary downturn. And I could watch them squirm. Tony appeared, red-faced, eyes locked on me like a predator who'd finally identified the thing that had been destroying his territory. You think you're clever, don't you? He spat, loud enough for the nearest tables to turn. His voice was shaking with rage and something that might have been fear. I smiled, cool and slow like a cat with a bleeding mouse. About what, Tony? You're the reason the Western Territories deal is bleeding us dry. You've been buying up our suppliers, blocking our contracts. His voice was climbing, losing control. Beautiful. Sounds like you have a competitor problem, I said lightly, taking a sip of champagne. Welcome to business. Wayne joined him then, less angry, more dangerous. His voice was quiet, measured, deadly. You're not just competing, Leah. You're dismantling us, piece by piece. I felt something surge through me. The moment I'd been waiting for. If I were, I said, my voice quiet, but somehow more dangerous, I'd make sure you never saw it coming. Wayne leaned in close. This isn't over. Wrong again. It was over. They just didn't know it yet. They tried to push back, of course. First, they cut bonuses for the mill workers I'd lured away, hoping they'd come crawling back. Instead, I offered those same workers signing bonuses and better health care. Every act of desperation made them weaker. Next, they launched a PR campaign about Randall Timber's proud legacy. I countered with leaked documents showing environmental violations they'd tried to bury. The local press ate it up like starving animals. The more they scrambled, the more mistakes they made. They broke contracts in desperation, got hit with lawsuits, lost key buyers. Investors began calling me directly, asking if I could stabilize things. Meanwhile, through a quiet merger, I'd gained controlling interest in the very distribution network Randall Timber relied on for 70% of its shipments. I didn't block them outright, that would have been too obvious. But I reallocated resources so their deliveries always came last. Late deliveries meant penalties, and penalties meant bleeding cash. By late summer, they were openly fighting in board meetings. I didn't even have to say much, just sit there, impeccably dressed, taking notes as they shouted at each other. The other directors were already looking to me as the sane, competent alternative, the inevitable choice. Then came the audit. Mr. Fenton, my not-so-secret ally now, called for a full, independent review of company operations. The findings? Disastrous. Mismanagement, wasteful spending, questionable side deals, half of which I'd engineered by quietly nudging the right dominoes. It all led to the emergency meeting. Tony, pale and sweating, tried to rally support. This is our company. We've run it for decades. Into the ground, I said. Calm, final, lethal. Wayne tried to spin it as a rough patch, but when the vote came, it was 5-2 in my favor. Just like that, I was CEO. The boardroom was silent except for the shuffle of papers as the decision was finalized. Tony stared at me like I'd gutted him. Wayne wouldn't look at me at all. I closed my folder, stood, and said the one thing I'd been saving for this exact moment. Dad always said a company is like a forest. Neglected and rot sets in. Sometimes you have to clear out the deadwood. Perfect. You want to know where my father was during all of this? While I was systematically destroying his precious legacy and dismantling his sons piece by piece? Hiding. The great Richard Randall, the man who'd built an empire with his bare hands and an iron will, had become a cowering shadow locked away in his estate. The first call came 3 days after I'd taken the CEO position. His voice sounded smaller than I'd ever heard it. Leah, we need to talk. The fury that shot through me was immediate and pure. No, Dad, we really don't. Please, just come to the house. Let me explain. Explain what? I snarled. How you erased me from the will without a conversation. How you sat there while Tony and Wayne carved me up at that dinner. How you taught them that I was disposable. I thought you needed to learn. I learned, I said, my voice deadly quiet. I learned that blood means nothing. I learned that family is just another word for people who'll stab you in the back while smiling. I learned that the only person I can trust is myself. Leah, those are your brothers. Those are the men who betrayed me, just like you did. He tried again, his voice breaking. I built this company for family. No, I snarled, the rage finally breaking free. You built it for your ego. You used family as window dressing. You created a hierarchy where only the boys mattered, where I was just some consolation prize daughter who should be grateful for scraps. Well, congratulations, Dad. You got exactly what you deserved. You wanted to teach me a lesson? Lesson learned. You created a monster in your own image, and now that monster owns everything you love. I hung up. The next week, he showed up at my office. My assistant tried to stop him, but he pushed past her, looking like he'd aged a decade. His face was gaunt, his clothes hung loose. You can't just ignore me, he said, standing in my doorway like a beggar. I looked up from my computer with the kind of cold indifference I'd learned from watching him dismiss people for years. I can do whatever I want, Dad. I'm the CEO now. This isn't the daughter I raised. You're right, I said, standing up slowly, letting the venom show in my eyes. The daughter you raised would have begged for forgiveness, would have accepted being cut out and said thank you for whatever scraps you threw her. That daughter is dead. You killed her at that dinner table. He sank into the chair across from my desk. I was trying to motivate you, to make you fight for what you wanted. I did fight, I said, leaning forward. I gave you a brilliant proposal that could have doubled our revenue. I spent a year researching, planning, bleeding for this company, and you threw it back in my face because it didn't come from one of your precious sons. I was wrong. Yes, you were. The words came out like gunshots. And now you get to live with the consequences. Now you get to watch me take everything you built and make it better than you ever could have imagined. Without you, without Tony, without Wayne. He sat there for a long moment, looking older and more broken than I'd ever seen him. Finally, he spoke again, his voice barely a whisper. "What do you want me to do?" I smiled, and I made sure it was the coldest, most brutal smile I could manage. "Nothing, Dad. Hide in that big empty house. Stay away from the company. Stay away from me. And every morning when you wake up, I want you to remember that everything you're seeing, every success, every expansion, every dollar of profit, is happening because I'm finally free of your toxic influence." He left without another word. That was 8 months ago. I haven't seen him since. And every day that passes, every victory I achieve feels like justice. The morning after the vote, my inbox exploded like a bomb had gone off. Investors, journalists, old friends who had kept their distance during my exile, suddenly tripping over themselves to congratulate me. Vultures who could smell success from 1,000 miles away. Leah Randall named new CEO in boardroom coup. Siblings ousted amid corporate scandal. From disinherited to industry leader, the Leah Randall story. Each headline felt like a victory lap around the graves of my brothers' reputations. The brothers? They were still in the building, but their offices looked like crime scenes. Half-packed boxes, closed blinds, the occasional muffled shouting that echoed down the hallways. I made sure to walk past their offices every day, slowly, savoring every moment of their humiliation. By the end of the week, they'd been escorted out with their severance packages, or what was left of them after legal fees and penalties. Watching security walk them to their cars was better than any Christmas morning I'd ever had. I called a press conference. Not in some back room with controlled lighting, but in the largest conference hall in the city, every media outlet invited. I stood behind the podium, Randall Timber's logo gleaming above me like a crown. "Our company," I began, my voice carrying to every corner of the packed auditorium, "has a proud history. But in recent years, it's been neglected, mismanaged, betrayed from within." I didn't use their names. I didn't have to. Everyone knew who I meant. I laid out the new policies, worker protections, profit sharing, environmental compliance. Each one was a knife twisted into the brothers' legacy of exploitation. The reporters ate it up. It wasn't just a leadership change, it was a redemption arc for the entire company. "Miss Randall, how do you respond to allegations that you orchestrated your brother's downfall?" I smiled. "I respond to those allegations the same way I respond to all business challenges, with results. Our quarterly projections speak for themselves." What would you say to people who claim this was about personal revenge rather than business strategy? I'd say that competence often looks like revenge to people who aren't used to seeing it. The room erupted in laughter. I was magnificent. Tony tried to start a rival firm called Randall Legacy Timber. Without distribution channels, suppliers, or the credibility I'd stripped from him, it collapsed within a season. By Christmas, he was living in a studio apartment and driving a 15-year-old Honda. Beautiful. Wayne was trickier. Whisper campaigns, anonymous tips to journalists. But when you've lived under constant attack, you learn how to control the narrative. Each rumor he spread, I countered with public transparency. By the time the dust settled, Wayne's concerns looked like nothing but bitter lies from a man who couldn't accept his own complete failure. The moment I knew I'd won came 6 months into my tenure. Mr. Fenton called me into his office with an expression I couldn't read. "There's something you should see," he said, sliding a manila envelope across his desk. Inside were photos. Tony and Wayne sitting at the end of a grimy bar in some nowhere town, nursing drinks like they were all they had left. No tailored suits, no swagger, no empire. Just two broken men who'd finally realized they'd lost everything that ever mattered. Tony's face was gaunt, his eyes hollow. Wayne looked shell-shocked, as if he'd just returned from a lost battle. They looked like ghosts of the men who'd once thought they could destroy me. I stared at those photos for a long time, drinking in every detail of their devastation. I thought I'd feel triumphant. Instead, I felt something even better. Complete. The hunger I'd carried for years, The rage that had driven me through months of careful planning and systematic destruction had finally been fed. And what I'd discovered was that revenge, when done properly, when done totally, doesn't leave you empty. It leaves you free. Free from the need to prove myself to people who'd never valued me. Free from the desperate hope that someday they'd see my worth. Free from the poison of a family that had never deserved or appreciated me. I hadn't just taken back what they'd stolen. I'd made it better, stronger, unbreakable. More than a year later, I stood at the floor-to-ceiling windows of my corner office. It used to be my father's, but I'd redecorated with steel and glass instead of his outdated wood and leather. I was watching the sunset paint the timberlands gold when my assistant knocked and entered. "Miss Randall, there's someone here to see you. Says she's your cousin? Emily Randall?" I turned, curious. Emily was my uncle's daughter, maybe 25. She had the same anxious and desperate look in her eyes that I'd once carried. She stood in my doorway like she was afraid I might throw her out. "Emily," I said, gesturing to the chair across from my desk, "what brings you here?" She sat down carefully, clutching a folder like it contained her life. "I need advice," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "Uncle Richard, he's been telling everyone in the family that what you did was wrong, that you destroyed the family business out of spite." I felt a familiar fire kindle in my chest. "And you? What do you think about it?" She looked up at me then, and I saw something I recognized. Fury barely contained beneath a veneer of politeness. "I think you did exactly what you had to do. I think they deserved everything they got." "Why?" She opened her folder and pulled out documents, emails, financial records, meeting notes, because they're doing the same thing to my father's construction company. Uncle Richard has been advising Dad on business strategy. I've been very involved, but now my brothers are being groomed to take over. And as for me, she laughed, but there was no humor in it. "I'm supposed to be grateful for a secretary position." I leaned forward, studying the papers she'd spread across my desk. The pattern was identical. Competent daughter pushed aside, incompetent sons elevated, father too proud to see his own blindness. "They cut you out," I said. It wasn't a question. "Yes, completely. Just last week, Dad updated his will. Everything goes to Michael and David. I get a trust fund, enough to live on, not enough to have any real power." I sat back in my chair, feeling something I hadn't felt since my own war began, the thrill of possibility. "What do you want me to do about it?" I asked. She met my eyes, and I saw steel beneath the desperation. Sudden fire blazed in her eyes. "I want you to teach me how to destroy them. All of them. The way you destroyed Tony and Wayne." I smiled, the same predatory smile I'd worn in that boardroom 18 months ago. It was time for the tiger to go hunting. Again. "Emily," I said, "I think we're going to be excellent friends." My family thought they could erase me with the stroke of a pen. They thought I'd disappear quietly, grateful for whatever scraps they threw my way. But they forgot one crucial detail. I'm a Randall. And Randalls don't just disappear, we conquer. My name is Leah Randall. I'm the CEO of the company that tried to erase me. I'm the daughter who refused to disappear. If you enjoyed this tale of family revenge and takeover, please like and subscribe for more stories about power, family, and justice. Have you ever been underestimated by the people who should have believed in you most? Has anyone ever cut you out, thinking you'd just fade away quietly? And was Leah justified, or did she go way overboard with her revenge? Leave a comment or tell us your own story below. If you're a fan of ruthless drama and epic comebacks, you'll love watching the video that just popped onto your screen. Thanks for watching.